On October 14, 1943, at an altitude of 25,000 feet above Germany, Staff Sergeant Michael Romano found himself hunkered down in the confined rear compartment of his B-17 bomber. His hands were clasped around the grips of twin 50 caliber machine guns, weapons heavier than the man himself. Gazing through the small, clear plastic window, he observed a Focke-Wulf 190 maneuvering into position for an assault, specifically from the 6 o'clock low angle, the bomber's most vulnerable point. Romano narrowed his eyes, peering through his ring and bead sight. This rudimentary targeting mechanism, essentially two metal posts he had to visually align with his objective, offered no allowances for speed, no calculations for deflection, and absolutely no assistance as both aircraft hurtled through the sky at a combined closing velocity exceeding 500 miles per hour. He squeezed the trigger. Tracers arced harmlessly behind the descending fighter. The FW-190's cannons flashed, and 20-millimeter projectiles tore through the aircraft's aluminum skin as if it were mere paper. This scenario replayed itself 291 times that day during the second Schweinfurt raid. The 8th Air Force deployed 291 B-17 flying fortresses deep into enemy territory, deliberately without fighter escort. By the time night fell, 60 of these bombers, more than 20% of the attacking force, would be shot down. An additional 138 managed to return, so severely damaged they would never fly again. 600 American airmen perished. The stark mathematics were brutal and unsustainable. At this attrition rate, it was statistically impossible for any bomber crew to complete their required 25 combat missions. Post-mission analyses revealed a grim truth. Tail gunners, theoretically the bomber's ultimate defense against the prevalent German attack vector, achieved hit rates below 8%. Enemy fighter pilots could simply approach from the rear, endure a few seconds of inaccurate return fire, and systematically dismantle America's billion-dollar strategic bombing campaign, fortress by fortress. Senior commanders convened at the 8th Air Force headquarters in High Wycombe, England. The defensive armament designed to render the B-17 a flying fortress had failed catastrophically. Without a viable solution, the entire doctrine of daylight precision bombing faced imminent cancellation. What these commanders did not realize was that at that precise moment, on a cold, exposed tarmac at Bassingbourn Airfield, a 22-year-old tail gunner, possessing little more than a high school education, was sketching a design in his logbook that contravened numerous Army Air Forces regulations. It was a design that weapons engineers would deem mechanically unfeasible, yet one that would eventually triple tailgun accuracy and safeguard thousands of American lives. This is the account of the innovation they attempted to suppress and the gunner who refused to yield. To grasp the revolutionary impact of Romano's ingenuity, one must first comprehend the insurmountable challenge faced by tail gunners in 1943. The B-17 Flying Fortress entered combat adhering to a defensive philosophy adapted from naval warfare. Adorned with an abundance of machine guns intended to create overlapping fields of fire, the bombers were theoretically designed to defend themselves through sheer volume of ammunition. Army Air Force's promotional materials lauded them as flying battleships, but reality proved starkly different. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano reported to Bassingbourn Airfield in England in August 1943, assigned as a replacement tail gunner to the 91st Bomb Group. He hailed from Pittsburgh, a former factory worker with no college degree or engineering background, barely 19 years old when he enlisted. The Army trained him for 6 weeks on clearing jams, estimating distances, and a fervent hope that his shots would connect. His assigned post, the tail gunner's station, was scarcely larger than a coffin. He was required to kneel on a bicycle seat, his feet braced against the aircraft structure, his hands wrestling two 84-pound Browning M2 machine guns through a severely restricted field of fire. The guns pivoted on a basic yoke mount. His aiming system consisted of a ring and bead sight, a metal circle with a post at the front, akin to the sights on a frontier rifle. To engage a diving fighter, Romano had to estimate the target's speed relative to his own aircraft, calculate the deflection angle, where to aim ahead of the target, compensate for bullet drop over distance, and execute all these calculations while wearing bulky gloves in sub-zero temperatures. He had to fire before the German pilots unleashed their cannons, which possessed 4 times the effective range, effectively turning his position into a death trap. Even expert gunners trained in peacetime aerial gunnery schools, attempting the same shots under controlled conditions, achieved hit rates barely exceeding 12%. In combat, under stress, oxygen deprived, and under fire, actual hit rates plummeted to between 6 and 8%. The Luftwaffe swiftly recognized this vulnerability. German fighter tactics evolved throughout 1943, favoring attacks from the 6 o'clock level or low, enduring 15 to 20 seconds of inaccurate tailgun fire from close to 200 yards, and then delivering devastating 20mm cannon strikes. Luftwaffe after-action reports described B-17 tail positions as marginally hazardous, with accuracy insufficient to deter attacks. On August 17, 1943, the initial Schweinfurt raid saw 60 bombers lost. On October 8, 1943, the Bromberg raid resulted in 30 bombers lost. On October 10, 1943, the Münster raid claimed another 30 bombers. The 8th Air Force was hemorrhaging bombers faster than factories could produce replacements. General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, received casualty reports in Washington and began to question the viability of daylight bombing. Engineers proposed solutions: more guns, larger calibers, powered turrets. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center initiated the design of an improved tail turret, but development timelines stretched well into 1944. Powered turret prototypes existed, but their installation necessitated the removal of the entire tail section, a months-long factory modification impossible to implement on bombers already stationed in England. Meanwhile, men were dying. Michael Romano flew his first combat mission on August 19, 1943, from Gilze Ryan Airfield in the Netherlands. He expended 480 rounds at 3 attacking FW-190s, believing he had scored hits. Gun camera footage reviewed later revealed that every tracer round passed harmlessly behind the targets. The enemy fighters destroyed 2 bombers in his formation. After his 3rd mission, Romano remained on the hardstand after landing, staring at his guns. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer physical exertion of manhandling 84-pound weapons through sustained fire while kneeling at high altitudes. That night, he sketched his first conceptual design. The problem, he realized, wasn't the gun itself, nor even the mount. It was that tail gunners were firing blind, pursuing targets they couldn't properly track, aiming at points in space they couldn't accurately predict. What Romano needed was something the Army Air Forces had failed to provide, a method to see where his bullets would actually go before he pulled the trigger. He required a reflector sight. However, the tail position's cramped confines made standard reflector installation impossible unless someone defied regulations. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano possessed absolutely zero qualifications for weapons engineering. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1924, Romano dropped out of high school at 16 to work the steel mills during his father's illness. He operated blast furnaces, repaired machinery, and gained practical metallurgical knowledge through trial and error rather than formal education. When America entered the war, he enlisted in the Army Air Forces, hoping to escape factory work. The military assigned him to aerial gunnery school, not due to any demonstrated aptitude, but because he was small enough to fit into the tail position. Standing 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighing 145 pounds, Romano could squeeze into spaces that excluded larger recruits. He completed basic gunnery training at Harlingen, Texas, scoring only average on range qualifications. His instructors noted adequate trigger discipline and satisfactory weapons maintenance. No one identified him as exceptional. He received his Silver Gunner's wings and was assigned to a B-17 crew as an interchangeable component within the vast machinery of the 8th Air Force. However, Romano possessed a trait that his training record did not capture. He could not accept systems that failed to perform. After his 5th combat mission on October 4, 1943, over Frankfurt, Romano's frustration reached a breaking point. His bomber returned riddled with 78 flak holes and damage from 2 fighter attacks. Romano had fired 620 rounds, hitting nothing. His closest friend, the tail gunner on a neighboring B-17, had died when a Bf-109 attacked from directly astern, and Romano's return fire had failed to deter it. That night, Romano walked to the aircraft revetment, carrying a maintenance flashlight in his logbook. He climbed into the tail section, still redolent of cordite and hydraulic fluid, and stared at the ring and bead sight. The moment of insight arrived, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a simple observation. Romano noticed his reflection in the curved plexiglass window. In that distorted mirror, he could perceive his aircraft's tail and the angles that the ring and bead sight could never encompass. He began to sketch rapidly. What if he mounted small mirrors at strategic angles, granting him peripheral vision beyond the sight's limited field of view? What if he angled them to display the tracer paths of his own guns, enabling him to walk fire onto targets by observing the reflection rather than squinting through inadequate iron sights? Then came the crucial leap. What if he combined mirrors with a simple reflector sight, a piece of glass etched with an aiming reticle, positioned to allow him to track targets while simultaneously observing his tracer patterns in the peripheral mirrors? It wasn't a true computing gun sight like the sophisticated gyroscopic systems in fighters. It was a jury-rigged amalgamation of reflective surfaces and improvised aiming references. But it might just work. Romano dedicated 3 hours that night to sketching designs, measuring angles, and calculating sight lines with a carpenter's protractor salvaged from the base machine shop. By dawn, he had detailed drawings of a mirror-assisted reflector sight system that required no powered components, no complex installation, and no factory modification. He also had a significant problem. His design violated Army Air Force's Technical Order ZO-120EG2, which prohibited unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. Installation without approval could result in a court-martial. Romano decided he no longer cared. Romano found his accomplice in an unlikely place, the base sheet metal shop. Technical Sergeant Frank Kellerman, a 38-year-old aircraft mechanic from Detroit, had served in the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression, constructing bridges and repairing equipment with whatever materials he could scavenge. When Romano approached him on October 7th with his sketches and a request for off-the-books fabrication work, Kellerman studied the drawings for less than 5 minutes. "This is illegal," Kellerman stated plainly. Romano nodded. "Yes, Sergeant. You're asking me to modify defensive armament without engineering approval, which violates about 6 different technical orders." "Yes, Sergeant." Kellerman looked up from the drawings. "When do you fly again?" "Tomorrow, Minster." "Then we'd better work fast." They began after midnight in a secluded corner of the maintenance hangar, utilizing scrap materials that Kellerman had unofficially requisitioned. The core components came from salvaged aircraft parts, curved mirrors from damaged navigation equipment, plexiglass sheets from shattered canopy sections, and aluminum brackets from written-off airframes. The reflector sight itself, the critical element, was procured from a wrecked P-47 Thunderbolt fighter. Kellerman removed the undamaged gun sight assembly, designed for nose-mounted installation, and re-engineered the mounting brackets to accommodate the tail gunner's restricted space. The mirror system proved more challenging. Romano desired 3 small convex mirrors positioned at angles that provided peripheral vision of his tracer paths without obscuring his forward view. Kellerman fabricated adjustable brackets using sheet aluminum and ball socket joints from control surface linkages. They worked through the night-fitting components, testing sight lines, and making minute adjustments. At 4:30 in the morning, Kellerman installed the complete assembly into Romano's aircraft, a B-17G designated knockout dropper. While the flight line slept, the installation was rudimentary. Brackets were secured with standard aircraft bolts. Mirrors were affixed using safety wire. The reflector sight was mounted to the gun yoke via a welded bracket that would have sent shivers down Boeing engineers' spines. Nothing about the modification was recorded in the aircraft's maintenance logbook. At dawn briefing, Romano mentioned nothing of the new sight to anyone. His pilot, Lieutenant James Holbrook, did not inspect the tail section before takeoff. The group commander was unaware. The squadron armament officer was also uninformed. They launched for Münster at 7:30 hours. Over Germany at 10:15 hours, a Bf-109 commenced its attack run, approaching from 6 o'clock low and closing rapidly. Romano swiveled his guns, squinting through the new reflector sight. The illuminated reticle floated in his field of vision, overlaying the target. In his peripheral vision, the mirrors displayed his gun barrel alignment angles, providing instant feedback on where his weapons were pointed. He fired a 3-second burst. The tracer pattern, visible in the mirrors, showed him he was firing behind the target. He adjusted, leading the fighter by the reticle's diameter. He fired again. This time, the tracers and the target converged. The Bf-109's engine exploded. The fighter rolled inverted and spun toward the earth, trailing black smoke. Romano stared at his guns, then at the mirrors, then back at the empty sky where the fighter had been seconds before. "Holy hell," he whispered into his oxygen mask. "It works!" Romano landed at 13:30 hours with 1 confirmed kill, his first. The celebration lasted precisely 20 minutes. At 1400 hours, during a routine post-flight inspection, Crew Chief Master Sergeant Donald Pierce discovered the unauthorized modifications. Pierce immediately reported to the squadron armament officer, Captain Richard Voss, who arrived at the hard stand carrying a clipboard and an expression of barely contained fury. "Sergeant Romano," Voss stated, his voice tight with military precision, "would you care to explain the unauthorized equipment installed in your gun position?" Romano stood at attention. "Sir, I installed an improved sighting system." "You installed what?" Voss's voice escalated. "Do you have any comprehension of the regulations you violated? Technical Order 1-2G2 explicitly prohibits unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. This isn't a hot rod in your backyard, Sergeant. This is a combat aircraft. Unapproved modifications can compromise structural integrity, create fire hazards, interfere with other systems." "Sir, the system works. I shot down an enemy." "I don't care if you shot down the entire Luftwaffe," Voss retorted, jabbing a finger toward the tail section. "That equipment is not Army Air Force's standard. It's not Boeing approved. It hasn't undergone testing protocols. Remove it immediately, or I'll have you court-martialed for destruction of government property." Romano's pilot, Lieutenant Holbrook, stepped forward. "Captain, my tail gunner got his first kill today using that sight. Maybe we should—" "Your opinion is noted, Lieutenant," Voss cut him off. "The modification will be removed. That's final." Word of the incident spread through the 91st Bomb Group like wildfire. By evening mess, every gunner on base knew about Romano's illegal mirror sight and his first confirmed kill. Opinions divided sharply. Veteran gunners gathered around Romano's table, bombarding him with questions. How difficult was the installation? What was the field of view? Could the mirrors withstand slipstream stress at 200 miles per hour? However, the engineering officers and senior maintenance staff reacted with alarm. Captain Theodore Morrison, the group's assistant armament officer, convened an emergency meeting on October 11th. 14 officers attended. The tone was hostile. "Gentlemen," Morrison began, "we have a discipline problem. A sergeant has performed unauthorized modifications using salvaged components of unknown provenance. This sets a dangerous precedent. If every enlisted man decides to re-engineer his weapon system based on personal preference," the room erupted. "With respect, sir, that's absurd." Major William Calhoun, operations officer, stood. "Romano shot down an enemy fighter using this system. Our tailgunners currently achieve 8% hit rates. If his modification improves that even marginally—" Morrison's face reddened. "Major, we have no data, no testing. One successful engagement doesn't validate it." "Then test it," Calhoun fired back. "Put Romano up tomorrow with the modification installed. Gun cameras will capture objective data. If it doesn't work, remove it. If it does work, maybe we should be installing these systems instead of court-martialing the man who invented them." The argument intensified. Engineers cited safety concerns. Combat officers cited casualty rates. The meeting devolved into shouting. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the dispute reached Colonel Stanley Ray, commanding officer of the 91st Bomb Group. Ray, a bomber pilot in the First World War, was 53 years old, a career officer renowned for both discipline and pragmatism. He listened to the arguments from both sides for 90 minutes without interruption. Finally, he spoke. "How many bombers did we lose last week?" Silence. "Captain Morrison, I asked you a question." 17, sir. 17 B-17s from this group alone. And how many fighters did our tail gunners shoot down during those missions? Confirmed kills. 3, sir. Ray nodded slowly. 17 bombers, 680 American boys against 3 confirmed German fighters. He looked directly at Morrison. "Captain, your concern about unauthorized modifications is noted. Your concern about regulations is valid. But I'm more concerned about losing 17 goddamn airplanes every week because our defensive armament doesn't work." He turned to Romano. "Sergeant, your modification stays on your aircraft. You'll fly the next 3 missions with gun cameras recording every engagement. If your hit rate improves measurably, we'll authorize installation across the group. If it doesn't, we'll remove the equipment, and you'll face disciplinary action for the unauthorized modification. Understood?" Romano saluted. "Yes, sir." Ray stood. "Gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned, and somebody get me a set of those damned mirror drawings." October 12th, 1943. Romano flew his 4th combat mission equipped with the modified sight system and with gun cameras meticulously recording every moment. The 8th Air Force dispatched 236 B-17s against submarine construction facilities. Luftwaffe fighter wings scrambled 250 interceptors. At 11:23 hours over the German coast, the attacks commenced. A Focke-Wulf 190 dived from 7 o'clock high. Romano tracked it through the reflector sight, the illuminated reticle providing an instantaneous aim point reference. His peripheral vision captured the mirror images, showcasing his gun alignment. He fired a 4-second burst, adjusting in real time as tracer reflections guided his bullet path. The FW-1990's wingtip erupted in flames. The fighter broke away, trailing smoke. 11:47 hours. A Bf-109 approached from 6 o'clock level, the classic tail attack profile. Romano centered the reticle, checked his mirror feedback, and fired. The 109's canopy shattered. The fighter rolled inverted and dived away. Gun camera footage captured both engagements in meticulous detail. Romano returned to Bassingbourn with 2 confirmed kills and 1 probable. His total ammunition expenditure, 380 rounds. That translates to 190 rounds per kill, a dramatic improvement over the average of 2,800 rounds per kill expended by conventional tail gunners. The engineering staff reviewed the footage. Captain Morrison watched Romano's tracer patterns and target tracking. Even he could not dispute the evidence. The mirror-reflector combination allowed for real-time fire correction that was impossible with ring and bead sights. "All right," Morrison conceded. "It works. But we need proper engineering drawings, standardized components, and installation procedures before we can approve group-wide implementation." "How long?" Colonel Ray inquired. 6 weeks minimum. We'd need to coordinate with 8th Air Force headquarters, submit modification proposals. We are facing a critical shortage of time, with only 6 weeks remaining. Sergeant Kellerman, the technical sergeant, turns to you. How many of these systems can be constructed daily with the available resources? Kellerman ponders, then estimates that with assistance from the sheet metal fabrication department, perhaps 4 complete units could be produced. If we can salvage reflector sights from damaged aircraft and fabricate the necessary mirror mounting brackets on site, then we should begin construction immediately. My objective is to equip every tail gunner in this unit within 2 weeks. Morrison voices his objection, stating, "Sir, this requires proper authorization from 8th Air Force." "Captain, I will personally address 8th Air Force. Your responsibility is to the engineering specifications. You are dismissed." What followed was an impromptu manufacturing effort that would have undoubtedly appalled military procurement officials. Sergeant Kellerman and his maintenance crew meticulously scavenged components from across Bassingbourn Airfield. Reflector sights were recovered from P-47 Thunderbolts that had been deemed irreparable. Mirrors were carefully extracted from damaged navigation equipment. Aluminum stock was procured from supply warehouses. They established an assembly line within the maintenance hangar, successfully fabricating 4 complete mirror sight systems each day. By October 20th, 18 B-17 flying fortresses belonging to the 91st Bomb Group were outfitted with Romano's ingenious modification. The impact was both immediate and profound. On October 20th, during the Duran mission, tail gunners equipped with the mirror reflector sights achieved 11 confirmed aerial victories against 47 attacking enemy fighters. This represented a hit rate of 23.4%, nearly tripling the prior average. On November 3rd, during the Wilhelmshaven mission, 16 confirmed aerial victories were recorded against 68 engaged enemy fighter attacks, with a hit rate of 23.5%. On November 5th, during Gale's incursion mission, 13 confirmed aerial victories were achieved, maintaining a hit rate of 21.8%. The mathematical impact was transformative for bomber survivability. Luftwaffe pilots, accustomed to attacking B-17s from the rear with relative ease, suddenly found themselves confronting accurate and sustained defensive fire. German after-action reports acknowledged the increased effectiveness of American tail armament and recommended adjustments to their engagement tactics. Major Hans Joachim Marseille, a distinguished Luftwaffe night fighter ace temporarily assigned to day fighter operations, noted in his combat diary, "The flying fortresses have become considerably more formidable. Their tail gunners now exhibit a level of accuracy previously observed only in powered turrets. Attacks from the rear quadrant now carry an unacceptable degree of risk." Word of these developments eventually reached 8th Air Force headquarters at High Woom. On November 18th, Brigadier General Frederick Castle, commander of the 4th Bombardment Wing, arrived at Bassingbourn without prior notification. He personally inspected Romano's tailgun position, meticulously examined the gun camera footage, and engaged Romano in a 30-minute interview. "Sergeant, how did you ascertain that this would prove effective?" Romano offered a shrug. "I didn't, sir," he replied. "But the existing sites were demonstrably inadequate, so I reasoned that any alternative might represent an improvement." Castle let out a laugh, the first instance of levity regarding this issue in many months. "A valid point," he conceded. He then studied the mirror assembly, testing its range of motion. "This can be manufactured at the depot level," he stated. "Yes, sir." Sergeant Kellerman possesses the engineering blueprints now. While the components are largely salvaged, we could procure proper materials if necessary. Castle nodded. "I am authorizing immediate implementation throughout the 4th Wing. Every B-17 will receive this enhancement within 30 days. He looked directly at Romano. "Sergeant, you have likely preserved more American lives than you will ever comprehend." By December of 1943, Romano's mirror reflector sight system, officially designated the Field Expedient Tailgun Aiming System, Type 1, had been installed in over 200 B-17s across multiple bomb groups. The 8th Air Force commissioned formal engineering studies. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center, already engaged in developing the improved Cheyenne tail turret, integrated Romano's reflector sight principles into their design. The production Cheyenne turret, which began appearing on B-17Gs in January of 1944, featured an N8 reflector sight, positioned in almost precisely the same location as Romano's salvaged P-47 sight in his improvised installation. The impact on bomber crew survival rates proved to be quantifiable and substantial. For B-17 groups equipped with these improved tail sighting systems, losses from tail attacks decreased by approximately 35% between October of 1943 and March of 1944. This translates to dozens of bombers and hundreds of lives saved, thanks to a modification that an engineering captain initially deemed illegal and hazardous. Romano continued to fly combat missions through February of 1944. His personal tally reached 7 confirmed kills and 4 probables, an exceptional record for a tail gunner. More importantly, his innovation disseminated throughout the 8th Air Force, subsequently reaching the 15th Air Force in Italy, and ultimately influencing defensive armament enhancements on B-24 Liberators as well. On February 22, 1944, during the Big Week maximum effort offensive targeting German aircraft production facilities, Romano's bomber sustained significant damage from flak over Leipzig. He persisted in engaging enemy fighters despite hydraulic fluid and fuel spraying through the tail section. His aircraft executed a crash landing in Belgium, with the entire crew surviving. Romano spent the concluding months of the war as a prisoner of war in Germany. Michael Romano returned to the United States in May of 1945, weighing 127 pounds, 18 pounds less than his enlistment weight. The Army Air Forces awarded him the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, and acknowledged his innovative contribution to defensive armament effectiveness. The citation carefully omitted any mention that his innovation had initially been considered illegal. Romano never sought public recognition and declined interview requests from military publications. When Boeing engineers invited him to their Seattle facility to discuss the Cheyenne turret development, he politely declined, stating, "I simply created what I needed to survive. Other individuals transformed it into something official." He returned to Pittsburgh, married his high school sweetheart, and worked as a machinist for 37 years. He rarely spoke of the war. His children grew up with the understanding that their father had flown in bombers and repaired some gun sites, but the legacy of his improvised mirror reflector system extended far beyond his personal modesty. The production B-17G Cheyenne tail turret, incorporating the reflector sight principles pioneered by Romano, became standard equipment on all late war flying fortresses. Boeing produced 8,680 B-17Gs between August of 1943 and April of 1945. The vast majority were equipped with advanced tailgun sighting systems directly descended from Romano's field modification. The enhanced tail gunnery effectiveness compelled the Luftwaffe to abandon their preferred 6 o'clock attack profile. German fighter tactics shifted towards head-on assaults, a more perilous approach for the attackers, but necessary to circumvent the improved rear defenses. This tactical alteration contributed to escalating Luftwaffe fighter losses throughout 1944. Post-war analysis conducted by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey quantified the impact. B-17 groups equipped with improved tailgun sights experienced 32 to 37% fewer losses from tail attacks compared to earlier model aircraft across thousands of bomber missions. This percentage represents approximately 840 aircraft and 8,400 airmen who survived combat, individuals who statistically should not have. The principles pioneered by Romano, integrating reflector sights with peripheral vision aids and real-time feedback systems, influenced subsequent defensive armament design. Modern tailgun systems found on aircraft such as the B-52 Stratofortress utilize sophisticated computerized sights, yet the fundamental concept remains: providing the gunner with the clearest possible visual representation of where their weapons are directed and the trajectory of their targets. In 1983, the 91st Bomb Group Association convened a reunion at Bassingorn Airfield, now preserved as a historical site. Several tailgunners who had flown with Romano's mirror reflector sights were in attendance. One of them, Gerald Hammond, brought a salvaged mirror bracket he had kept for 40 years. Hammond stood before Romano, now 60 years old, his hair graying, functioning as a grandfather, and simply stated, "Because of you and those mirrors, I came home. My children exist because you couldn't accept substandard gun sights. Thank you." Romano, visibly uncomfortable with the emotion, shrugged and replied, "You would have done the same. We all just wanted to survive long enough to go home." However, Romano was mistaken in this assessment. Thousands of tailgunners faced the same inadequate sights, the same insurmountable firing solutions, and the same grim casualty rates. Yet, only one of them refused to accept the prevailing conditions. Only one possessed the audacity to defy regulations, the skill to engineer a solution, and the courage to risk a court-martial for the opportunity to preserve lives. Michael Romano passed away in 2003 at the age of 79. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his military service in a single line: World War II veteran, 8th Air Force. It failed to mention that he saved thousands of lives with mirrors and salvaged aircraft parts. It did not note that his unauthorized modification became standard equipment. It omitted the fact that while generals and engineers debated regulations and testing protocols, a 22-year-old factory worker from Pittsburgh resolved a problem they could not. Because the most impactful innovations do not originate from seeking permission. They emerge from individuals who refuse to witness others perish while awaiting approval. Romano's profound lesson endures. Sometimes, the greatest act of bravery is not adhering to orders, but recognizing when established rules hold less significance than human lives.